camera's not on. There it is. Okay. I want to welcome you to the meeting of the Senate Higher Ed Committee, March 23rd, 2021. This morning we're going to have Senator Chuck Payne have the invocation. Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to this day, Lord, to just thank you for all the many blessings in our lives, Father. We thank you for all the food you give us to the nourishment of our body, and that our bodies can serve you and serve everything about you with everything that we do. Lord, we just ask you to guide us throughout these measures today. Give us clear eyes and minds of discernment that we will reflect you in all things that we do. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay. First bill we're going to hear today from Chairman Martin. If you would, do you mind going to the podium? It's right behind you. First bill we're going to take up is House Bill 617, and the reason we had the wrong LC number in the folders, and we're printing those and distributing them.
Yes, sir. The LC number I have, I mean, do y'all have a new bill from what we passed in the House?
No, the 617 is the same bill. We're working off of LC 490503S.
Yes, sir. That's what I have. Yes, sir.
Anytime.
Jeremy, yes, sir. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about this a bit, I think, 2 weeks ago now, and this bill seeks to prepare Georgia for the name, image, likeness, ability to compensate student athletes if and when that is determined to be the way to go in amateur athletics from the governing bodies, and we probably take congressional action. What we're seeking to do in 617 is just put language in place to prepare a bit of a trigger bill for the Georgia student athletes so they can be prepared. I'm sure, as I said before, Senator, this will evolve based on the outcome of the congressional work or courts that deal with this. And we just need to do that, and in my opinion, ask your favorable consideration so that our athletes can be treated on par if and when this happens. If the NCAA doesn't move, if Congress doesn't move to make this the law of the land, so to speak, where amateur athletes can be compensated for their name, image, likeness, this bill would remain inert and moot in Georgia code.
Okay. Does everyone have the right LC number? I should have made sure before we got started. LC 490503S. We heard this a couple of weeks ago. Do we have any? It's in your folder. Should be the last bill in your folder. Senator Hickman.
Yes, sir. Thank you again for being here. Go back through, and you said that we're putting in some, or proposing to put in some trigger points in case Congress passes it or the NCAA passes it. What kind of time period is in this length of this bill? Is it like a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, for lack of a better term, and as I mentioned before, I'm not an attorney, Senator. Michael Walker, I believe he staffs the Senate committee as well as my House Higher Education Committee, could opine on that. But my understanding of the situation now is one or more states has actually sued the various athletic associations for the ability to compensate or have their athletes be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. That's going through court. There's also conversations going on in Congress about how to deal with this, because and then we have a former Congress member as a member of this committee, but I think that the NCAA and some of these athletic associations are somewhat deemed to have monopolistic powers, so that they may be able to be governed by Congress. And even if the NCAA decides that they're not going to allow athletes to be compensated, Congress may decide, if you're going to continue to operate the way you do many times on public property and so forth, that you will do these things. So what this bill seeks to do is, if that comes to pass, It provides some safeguards, some training for the student athletes in Georgia public and private post-secondary institutions so that they would get some education on how these contracts would affect them and go in place. It also has language in so that if a team had a contract, that it would not conflict with the individual student athlete's contract.
I think you mentioned last time that maybe Florida has already instituted something like this. So is Florida, by instituting something like this, is Florida already compensating the athletes?
No, sir. Not to my knowledge, at least. And right now, the NCAA would take a position that if an athlete is compensated, that they would be, if they're compensated within the sport in which they're participating at the collegiate level, they would be ineligible to participate. If you remember all the way back to, I don't want to get wrong in my history here, but I think Jim Thorpe might have been one of the first athletes that was found to have been compensated and may have had some effects on his amateur status as it relates to his participation in the Olympics. We all know now Olympic athletes can be compensated by their countries at a certain level for their attainment of winning a gold, silver, or bronze medal. We know people can sign a baseball contract out of high school and go play minor league or major league baseball and still participate in the NCAA in football and a variety of things. So my understanding is some states have implemented language like this in preparation so that if and when that comes to pass, their athletes, as they come into post-secondary education, would have the law in place of how that compensation would work within the institution. For instance, it's very important that, or at least in my opinion, I put it before the Senate members as well, to think of it, it's important that members of the university system, the college that's recruiting the athlete, to not be involved in the compensation of that athlete. We don't want to intertwine that, so this law would prohibit, for instance, an athlete was going to the University of Georgia, it would prohibit the university, the coach at the university or anyone directly related to the university to have or facilitate the contract for that student athlete with a third party for their name, image, and likeness. There should be an arm's length agreement. So this is just protections for the student athlete in Georgia code should the NCAA begin to allow this in the future.
Does this actually pit one state against another, though, as far as if we decide this, what Florida decides versus South Carolina versus Alabama? Or is it,
Well,
Mr. Chairman, let me say this. If you'd like to take off your mask,
yes, sir.
feel
Can you hear
free
me
to do
better?
so. I think it's more understandable in the mic.
thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, as I said last time, Senator, some people tell me I have a face for radio, so I'm better to have the mask on. But I think the senator. So the idea would be, Senator, is if we don't do this, it could be at some point in the future if this was approved in the NCAA, the athletic associations adopted this, and student athletes could be compensated. In other states, you could certainly argue that institutions in our state would be at a disadvantage in recruiting athletes because Georgia law doesn't allow for that compensation. So it's not an attempt to get ahead per se. It's an attempt to stay on par. And I suspect over time that all of the states will adopt something similar to this. And again, once the NCAA, or if and when the NCAA moves forward, with court action or congressional authorization to allow it, we will probably have to tweak this legislation, much like the IRC update that we do to make sure we fit into what the federal law allows for compensation and how it fits into Georgia law.
So again, just from my mind, this bill does not allow Georgia to go in and start compensating athletes.
Absolutely not. No, if we were to do that today, they would be deemed ineligible in the athletic association. It could be NCAA, it could be NAIA. There's a number of them. Yes, sir. This does not put us ahead of the game. This simply makes us in a spot ready so we would be on an equal footing and equal playing field. Should Congress act, or should there be some settlement and agreement at the NCAA board level or the NAIA board level?
And where is it at the NCAA or the Congress level? Where is it at now with that?
I don't want to take we always tend to make fun of our friends in Congress. So when I say this, I don't mean it funny. I just mean it to be an absolute fact. I'm not sure where it is in the congressional process right now. I wouldn't attempt to. From what I understand, at the athletic association level, they're discussing it. It's one of those things that you find a lot of times in policy and politics, sir, that if you ask the NCAA, I think they'll tell you they have friends for it and friends against it, and therefore they're friends. And by that I mean they want to keep a vibrant college competitive atmosphere, and there's some universities that feel very strongly that it's needed. Other universities feel that it's not, and they have a pretty good board and governance structure that I feel like will come together and come out for a good across-the-board option, because we have to realize while we have large institutions here in Georgia, there are small NCAA Division I institutions, and not all of those are created equal, yet the NCAA tries to put them on a level playing field.
I think, just in a way of clarification, many times we'll pass a constitutional amendment, we'll also pass enabling legislation that was passed in conjunction with it. So if the constitutional amendment passes, the enabling legislation is what enables it to go into play. This is almost like enabling legislation.
Yes, sir.
That's to
Yes,
be
sir.
in place and in preparation when and if there's any change that comes from the organizations in Congress. And if it never happens, the bill's moot. So as far as when it kicks in, if it's never changed from a higher level, then it'll never be put in place. That's
correct,
Senator
sir.
Beach.
If you're ready for a motion.
Well, let me back up just a little bit. Are you done, Senator Hickman? Were you
Yes, sir,
finished?
I am. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good Senator. Senator Max Burns.
Good morning, afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I lose track of time. I appreciate the legislation. I'd like a little bit of clarification on line 39 and 40. There's wording that says such compensation must be commensurate with the market value of the authorized use of the student athlete's name, image, and likeness.
Yes, sir.
How is market value determined?
Yes, sir. Isn't that what we believe here in the capitalistic society? I think it's a lot like the best way I would say that, sir, is if you look at it, you would know that I believe the point. Now, I'm serious. I knew how that was going to sound, Senator. All right. But I think what they're trying to get at, Senator, is for instance, out, and I say this as a pure example. I don't mean it to be an accusation toward any university or any individual. But there's a fella out in the West, I think, that's a big sponsor of the University of Oregon. Help me out here. Is it it's Nike, correct?
Phil Knight.
Yeah, so he's a big sponsor out there. So for instance, they could have, and again, I don't mean this to be directed toward Oregon or the gentleman or the company, but that's a place where using a quarterback, a star quarterback's name, image, and likeness could be good for the brand, a reasonable, arm's length business transaction. But if all of a sudden he was going to pay that young man $100 million for the use of his name to come to Oregon and throw the football around, somebody would look at this and call foul on that and say, hey, you're just buying the player to come there, and that's getting around the amateur status. So I believe, Senator, that's what we're after in this legislation. I hope the wise souls at the NCAA will refine and define that for us even further, but that's what those lines are trying to get at.
So the reality is we have a very difficult time determining what the market value is for a student athlete, their image or their likeness.
Yes, sir. That's a lot like the fair market value of your house when they're appraising it to charge you taxes. It's a willing buyer and a willing seller. So if you're not willing to sell your house, I would say that the appraiser couldn't come up with a thing, because you're the only willing seller there could be, and if you're not willing to sell it, how do they get a fair market value? Same thing is a bit here. If the young man or the young lady is not willing to sell their name or use their name, image, likeness, how do you get to the fair market? So it's a bit of a liquid situation. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Any further questions from the committee? Senator Beach?
Yes, I would move due pass on House Bill 617, committee sub.
Okay, we're passing LC 490503S. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor raise your hand. All opposed? I believe it was 7-1, is that what you got? Okay. Motion passes 7-1. Next bill we'll hear is House Bill 67. There was a substitute that was given to you. We are working off of LC 490547, House Bill 67. Make sure you have that sub. There was 47S, yes, I'm sorry. 490547S. There was the wrong one was in your package, but last four digits 0547. Chairman Martin.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and the bill I have, I'm a version behind you. I have 0541. So I know the Senate Chairman Tippins has worked on this. This is a bill much like we passed out of the House. The Chairman Tippins has changed the extension from being a 1 year, from being a 5-year extension to being a 1 year extension on the carry forward funds. And Senator, you've added some reporting language. I don't know if you want me to opine on that or try to discuss that, or if you'd like to do that, but it's language to bring to the Governor's Office of Budget and Planning, the Senate Research Office, and the House Budget and Research Office information on these carry forward funds that includes and not limited to the amount of those funds and the projected application that each university or technical college system intends for that.
Okay, let me give you a little background. The bill first came to us as Senate Bill 109, and it was an extension of the sunset clause for 5 years on the retention of fund sources that are allowed within the university system to accumulate funds and not lapse back into the general budget. The Constitution of the state says that any funds not used during a particular fiscal year will lapse back into the state treasury. These funds have been set up, I'm not sure the exact date, but it's been a little over 20 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And it's set up, there's a sizable amount of money that has accumulated in these funds. I was not even aware that they existed. In these funds, there's a 3% limitation on tuition that's collected in terms of accumulation of funds. These other funds basically had no cap on them. When I got into the issue, I requested the information. There is a sizable amount of money there. And what this bill does is enable us to extend this instead of the sunset on it for a year. For 5 years, we're going to extend it for a year and look at it next year. But in the meantime, we also pass some other language. And I'll go through by page and line the changes that have been made from when it came over in the House. On page 2, section 1, part 1, section 1-1 of the bill dealt with the writing off of debt from the university system. And I put in some language on there. This procedure shall not be available to the Board of Regents of the University System of Georgia or the State Board of Technical College System of Georgia where the obligor has accumulated a total of $3,000 or more of such debts or obligations in favor of an institution of the University System of Georgia. What that basically says is a single individual, $3,000 is a max on that. It's not going to be a revolving $3,000. If they can't pay it at the end of the semester, it'll be written off and they can accumulate another. This is a maximum cap of $3,000 per individual. Another change that was made is on page 4, line 81. The amount of revenue from departmental sales of services, continuing education fees, technology fees, or indirect cost recoveries that shall not lapse under this code section shall not exceed 3% of the total of all such revenue, provided, however, that no institution of the university system shall retain such non-lapsing revenues unless the following conditions are met. no later than August 1 of each year, a revenue and spending plan is submitted by the institution to the Board of Regents, which details the origination of the non-lapsing revenues and the amount, timing, and projected use of such non-lapsing revenues. No later than October 1st of each year, the Board of Regents should review and approve, or could amend if they so choose, the institution's revenue and spending. And also, it opens the transparency for review of these funds. The Board of Regents shall timely provide the Office Planning and Budget, the House Budget and Research Office, and the Senate Budget and Evaluation Office with copies of each institution's revenue and spending plan as approved by the Board of Regents, and such information as is requested and deemed necessary by such offices to evaluate such plans. This does not cap these funds. This does not limit the accumulation of these funds. What this does is open the transparency of them. We want to look at them for a year. It'll come back to us next year. And this puts more focus on the need to accumulate. I'll be honest with you, if the type of money that we're accumulating, if it can be used in capital projects and we can avoid bonded indebtedness of the state over a period of time, if it's plowed back in and it's paid for the day we walk in the door, that's a better situation than having to retire long-term debt. But this is a situation we really needed more time. I mean, I spent more time on this bill this session than any other bill I've dealt with. And Chairman's been great to work with on this. And I believe this gives us the transparency. It gives us the time to take a closer look and make a more informed decision when we come back in session next year.
Mr. Chairman, may I add one thing to your,
Yes,
your
sir.
remarks? The chairman mentioned that he had added some language at the middle. Again, I don't have the exact bill y'all do, so I'm around the $3,000 about the write-off. I just wanted to make clear to the committee what the chairman's doing, works, but this is not a write-off as in forgiven. This is a financial write-off. If you look at it in a business sort of thing, this would be coming from moving the money from accounts receivable to bad debt. So you're not counting on that as operational income to be collected right away. And once a student has that happen, they're not allowed to continue their education until that's paid off. I just wanted to be real clear with the Senate on that. This is just to move the money from accounts receivable, like money that's collectible, into a column. We've done everything we could to collect it, and we can't. And so we're moving it down there and say it's still owed, but we can't count on it to run the business next semester. So the student would not be able to come back until that was cleared. So that's a bit of a belt and suspenders that the senators added with the additional language there. Keeps the taxpayer safe.
Any other comments, questions? Senator Burns?
Mr. Chairman, I applaud the desire to gain success. I would like to acknowledge, if it's true, that the funds that we're talking about for departmental sales services, continuing education, technology, direct cost recovery, none of those are publicly funded items. Is that correct?
Some of them are. So the thing, non-recurring costs that refund or accumulation of non-recurring costs. My understanding.
That is tuition.
Pardon?
Is that correct? Would that be
That's not tuition. Tuition is separate. Non-recurring cost. There's over $250 million in that fund, university-wide, system-wise, right now, and it's predominantly in the research universities, but it's my understanding the way this works. A lot of times the cost of a research project is funded by the state, and quite often either the work product is sold or marketed and comes back to the system. And so, the cost of running the program originally was paid for by the state. And so this way, it comes back to the institution that generated the revenue, but there is oversight on it as to how it would be spent. It's just not left an individual's discretion on what it's going to be spent on. And ideally, it'll be spent either to further the programs of the institution or either for capital projects within the university system and the technical college system. I mean, we'll get to another part of the bill. The technical colleges are covered, but it's identical language.
I agree with you. I think that the challenge restriction and support of these revenues. My experience was that no revenue expenditures were made unless they were reviewed and approved by the Board of Regents. So that as fees and services and various revenue was retained, it was identified and earmarked to a specific project, mostly capital projects or technology-based projects or student service projects.
If that's the case, nobody has anything to worry about,
Absolutely.
because that's what the bill provides for by law.
And for clarification, the 3% limit is only a limit if these requirements for reporting are not provided. Is that correct? Or if I read it correctly on line 83?
It means, let me tell you, the 3% limit, if they can accumulate basically up to 3% of the annual revenue of that fund,
Of the fund?
of that revenue stream, because these are tied directly to a revenue stream. But some of these percentages that are being retained are like 80% of our annual revenue of one particular fund that I recall. So in that, again, I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong. I'm just saying we need to know where the funds are, what the intentional use of them are. And also, I think we need to look at them and look and evaluate the churn factor. Are these funds that are turning over 2 or 3 times on an annual basis, or are they building? I can say this, on a 5 or 6 year look back, there's been a steady increase, and there's been about $300 million added to this fund in the last 6 years. So,
And generally, I think. 300 million? That accumulation was for future projects.
That's-
Large capital projects, like you pointed out, would allow us to complete a project but not have to incur any indebtedness. Just a point of clarification, does this bill, as it's currently written, does it restrict in 2022, FY '22, the ability to retain revenue from sales and services, including ed, technology, those indirect fees? Is it restricted to 3%?
no, sir. It just says if it's above 3%, they've got to have a plan.
Very good.
And it's-
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
It doesn't
Have a plan.
It doesn't restrict them from accumulating it. It doesn't take away anything that's currently there. It just says whatever's there, if it's over 3%, you've got to have a plan. It's got to be approved by the trustees of the local institution, which in turn has to be approved by the Board of Regents.
We don't have trustees, we have foundation trustees at the institutional level, but the oversight of the university system unit is through the regents, and the same is true of TCS.
Well, it'll be prepared by the institution. Whoever is in the institution, they'll derive that plan, and then it in turn has to go to the regents for approval. But the main thing is this will be memorialized, and it'll be available if anybody says, well, why are all these funds parked over here? Well, this is the reason. This is what we have in place for.
I concur with that.
And also, we can show every penny that comes in and every penny that goes out.
I concur. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions, I'll entertain a motion. Senator Huffstatler moved due pass to LC 49.
0547S.
Let me get it. I think I've already turned it over. LC 490547S. We have a due pass. We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Chairman
Senator.
Martin. I appreciate you working with us on this.
Do you have somebody to carry? Yes, Senator Cowles is here. All of them? Both of them? Yes, sir. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wheelhour, I think he's next on our list. Yes, sir. We're looking at HB 152, post-secondary education exemption application, LC 490370S. LC 490370S.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let me get to
I want you to get there before we go. We've heard this bill before.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody on board? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative?
So yes, as you said, this is House Bill 152, LC 490370S. This is for the Non-Public Post-Secondary Education Commission. This is, as we walked through last week, does a couple of things. In Section 1, there are these schools are located on military bases that are overseen by the federal government. This would just allow the federal government to take care of those and take them out from underneath our umbrella. Section 2 is just a cleanup of numbering of codes that had been messed up for quite a while. Section 3, this just gives the discretion to the director to be able to do some of these reviews remotely so that they are not traveling to all 700 of these schools every single year. Section 4 simply expands puts a couple additional tiers into the bond amounts to make sure that students' tuition is covered appropriately for these schools should they close their doors and want to protect these students. That's it. And I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Do I have any questions from the committee? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. Have due pass by Senator Strickland. Second by Senator Payne. We are, again, due pass LC 490370S. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much,
thank you, sir.
Representative. Who's carrying the bill for you?
I believe Senator Payne is.
Senator Payne. Next on our agenda today, Representative Dempsey, House Bill 291. We're going to be working off of LC 490472S.
Could you read that for me
Chairman
one more
Dempsey.
time? I'm
If
sorry.
you would, take your mask
I
off
am.
and you
I
feel
am
free
sorry.
to pull.
You know,
If
we wear them so much. I believe you said it was 0472S, right? Is that right?
0472S. Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Just want to make sure I have the right one, too. I know we worked on it in several ways. So,
Right.
yes, bringing this back to y'all again today, I feel like it was well vetted in here. We talked about a number of issues and looked at potential changes, and as I understand it, I think they've been worked out, but I'm here for any questions that you might have. The intention and purpose of this is simply to increase the capacity of nursing, remove that financial limitation for some people, give a little encouragement for some of those students through the Tuition Equalization Grant Program. I was here when, in 2011, when that was established. All 34 of those schools today are doing well. The challenge is to add another school to that list is very challenging, actually. So this is very tightly drawn to limit it specifically to nursing schools. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Do you have any questions? Senator Hickman?
Was that the online program school?
It is not. It's a bricks and mortar school that is here in Atlanta, Georgia. The main one today is Atlanta Chamberlain University of Nursing, only for nursing. So it's specifically drafted for that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions?
That may answer mine. Apologize, I missed the last meeting when you vetted this out. So you've got in there that, and I applaud, we certainly need more nurses in there. So you've got the lines 59 and 60. It's not a Bible school, College of Theology. So like Emory has a School of Theology, they're not qualified.
They are all ready. It is, there is specific language that addresses that. We did talk about this last time because I know that was a big concern. So the language mirrors the underlying bill. Legislative Council has said it specifically needs to be in there. So after consulting with them again after our last meeting, it appears that removal of this language from any exemption in this code section could negatively impact those schools that already are existing. The schools, there are 34 colleges. So Senator Hofstadter, like where we are, Shorter.
Shorter,
I think of
Berry.
Shorter, I think of Berry, of Mercer, Morehouse, all have broad opportunity to use the tuition equalization grant. This is specifically drafted just tightly to allow nursing capacity.
And since it's only one school, I wouldn't imagine it's a huge cost, but I didn't know if anybody had looked at
It is
the
not.
fiscal impact on the.
It is not. We estimated that the number for just the tuition equalization grant would be about $300,000. But they would be eligible for Hope and Zell Miller, just like the other schools are at the same time. So,
Okay.
yeah.
There's also one other university fund that they would be eligible to receive, and I talked with a lobbyist this morning that represented Chamberlain, and the estimated cost on this annually is probably somewhere between $1.1 million and $1.6 million annually. The TEG grant, the tuition equalization grant, is just $380,000, I think, annually estimated. But the other that comes along with it, the other eligibilities, raises that. It's probably going to be, from what I understand, over $1 million a year. We do not have a fiscal note on it, but in full disclosure, you need to know what the cost of it is. I asked specifically two things. Number one, could we carve it out just for the tuition equalization grant? They said that could not be done because when they got tuition equalization grant, it opened the door to the rest of it, and there was no way to do a carve out. I also asked about taking out the Bible colleges or divinity schools that's in the bill. I don't quite understand why it's in the underlying bill. I don't understand why it needs to be in this bill. I'll be honest with you. My desire was to cut it out, and I was told that it was a request that were made by those institutions. You know, I did not have time to tease out all the answers on this. You know, but between now and when we bring this bill to the floor, if we can find that can be eliminated and not have a detrimental effect on existing universities and not have an existing effect on the Bible colleges. My understanding was that some of the Bible colleges, I don't know of any that offer a nursing program, but if they did, it was mentioned that they had requested to be exempt from governmental regulations, which they would be getting the funds anyway. So I don't know the answer to that. I was not here when this bill was originally passed, and I can't tie it down. It was passed originally in 1995. Then.
No, I was here, but this escaped my attention.
Is there anybody Ledge Council
This is
here?
Pardon?
Is Ledge Council here today, or?
Michael has worked closely on it, and I know the chairman and I have both been in touch with
Is
him
Michael Walker online?
about it.
Legislative Council. I'm sure he's watching. Let me see here. Pardon?
I had another question, too.
Okay, Senator Orrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the author, you know, I saw some numbers that are no secret, and that is that the cost of the degree, I think, is $24,000 a year at Chamberlain, whereas our technical schools, our public institutions that are underwritten with tax dollars, have a much more reasonable price, you know, down in the four-figure area. You've seen that. I think some other people on the committee have seen those numbers too. And if you could just address that, I mean, there's underlying realities, but I have encountered among constituents, you know, what I really saw is kind of rip-off proprietary school practices. They promise something, they seek to get qualified or certified. They go into massive debt, and they come out on the other end without a job and without much of a, and I don't mean to demean the institution that has come before us with that, but there is such a vast difference in the cost of getting a nursing degree at a place like that and going and getting it at one of our publicly funded institutions.
Right. Well, as far as a technical college, this is a Bachelor's of Science in nursing, so that is a difference. It's a 4-year program. The information on Chamberlain, though, their pass rate and their hire rate is way above the national average. And if you look even in the legislation, one of the things that is in there, let me see if I can get to that line, states the percentage that they must stay in line with to continue this. National Council Licensure Examination, 4 years average passage rate at least 85%.
959, yes.
Yeah, so it is requiring outcomes as well, I believe, not just attendance. Or at least giving that strong opportunity of such, I would
So
say.
you're aware of that huge gap in the cost of getting a degree there versus getting it in our publicly funded?
Well, it's the same thing as if you went to Berry College or Shorter College in my hometown. You know, you're making a choice. But I will tell you this, our nursing schools are full and there are wait lists, so that's where the capacity issue comes in, is that this is another avenue. Many of these students, too, it's not their first career. If you remember when Dr. Little, the president of the Atlanta campus, spoke here when I last presented the bill last week, she spoke to those great success rates they have, but that also they are often older students. It's very, very diverse. I think it's 90% female, 10% male. That's not as diverse, but the age is about 70% is 25 and older, so it's your more serious student that is committed to this and is probably working at the same time, possibly managing a family, and any help we can give to encourage, I think, and help them be on an equal playing field with these other schools, these other 34 that are already there, will help increase our capacity.
Senator Burns.
Just to comment and to Senator Orrick's point, while expensive, the issue is indeed access. Many students apply to state schools of nursing, and it's very competitive. Some are not successful in admissions, and then regrettably some don't complete the program effectively. But I recognize the need for both public and private options, and if we have a reliable player that has invested in the infrastructure and faculty to deliver these programs, then I support the legislation, because we need every option when it comes to adding nurses to our state.
We do. Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? I'll entertain a motion. Senator Burns moves do pass on LC 490472S. Where was the second? Senator Hickman on second. Had another one over here. Have a motion, second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you. And
Chairman.
I believe
Dempsey.
Senator Strickland is going to carry it for me.
Senator Strickland.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good to see y'all.
That brings us to the last bill of the day, Chairman Randy Nix. We're looking at House Bill 606, LC 490459.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't sure whether it was just me or is this just you go in numerical order?
No, it's what's on the list.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, we talked about this House Bill 606, the last meeting that you had. This passed out of the House 161-0, and all it does is it adds the Georgia Independent School Association to the list of accrediting agencies that will be recognized by the state. And this came about real quickly. I've got some people who can speak better than I can because there's some questions. That on July the 1st of 2020, Georgia Independent School Association began a full accreditation program through a partnership with Cognia. That Cognia, and that was the question I had there, the corporate successor to SACS and Advanced Ed. They have joined with the other southeastern states, Florida, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Alabama, and have a full partnership with Cognia to do the accreditation for these schools. And it gives them another opportunity. The chairman had called me this morning and had some questions about it, and I have some folks here that can help me. Paula Gillespie is the person who works with GISA specifically in the accreditation area. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to try to answer a question, but it may be better to let Ms. Gillespie answer those if you'd like. Okay.
If you would step to the mic and introduce yourself, feel free to remove your mask.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Paula Gillespie. I'm the Director of Accreditation for GISA. I am a 45-year educator, both public and private school. Was on the GISA board before I retired, and now work part-time to continue my work in schools.
Okay. Would you like to speak to the bill?
Excuse me?
Would you care to speak to the bill?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to provide some insight. GISA is the oldest professional development association in the state of Georgia, and we provide professional development for teachers, for administrators, for staff workers, for board training, strategic planning. We have an Emerging Leaders Institute, and we're all about continuous growth. Our vision is better independent schools for a better Georgia. Our schools are very diverse. We have 156 schools in the state of Georgia, ranging from Woodward Academy as a member, who is, they are the largest independent school in the continental United States, all the way to Piedmont Academy here in the Atlanta area, which is about 50 students. And again, our goal, our president, Dr. Jackson, our goal years ago was to become a creditor. We have a staff of former heads of school, former principals, those of us who have been very active in accreditation for many years. I've worked with accreditation through SACS, through Advanced Ed, through the Southern Association, the Virginia Association. I worked with the Florida Association. We've also worked with South Carolina and had input from those folks as we developed our program. Cognia, the global leader in accreditation, approached us a few years ago and asked if we would be interested in developing accreditation as one of the few states in the area that did not have an accreditation process. And we acknowledged that that would be a wonderful thing for us to do. We had wanted to do it, and with their endorsement, that certainly gave us credibility. So over the past 2.5 years, we developed our accreditation process that deals with learning, resources, and leadership within schools, looking at all areas. And I'm so proud to say that last July 2020, we became a partner with Cognia and began that accreditation process. Again, the reason we're here today is to merely add GISA to the list of recognized accreditors in the state of Georgia. I will say that our focus is schools that may join us on an affiliated status. If you join as an affiliate member, you are not accredited. You don't have to be accredited. Those schools are especially interesting to me because we can work with them and help them be the quality and accountable independent schools that they need to be in the state of Georgia, and then they can become general members after they've received that accreditation. And also we have some small schools that have some accreditation. We like to think that we provide continuous growth and improvement throughout our process, and that working with us and seeking accreditation with GISA, they would have that opportunity, especially with all the professional development that we provide. So, and again, we are available and accessible to our schools. Our staff is spread out all over the state. Our office is in Thomasville, but I'm in Fayette County. We have folks in South Georgia. We have folks in North Atlanta, and we're able to reach out and be close to our schools and up close and personal. So again, we are about accountability, continuous improvement, and excellence, and we hope that through our accreditation process, we'll provide greater schools for the state of Georgia. And if you have any questions.
Do you have any questions for Chairman Nix or Ms. Gillespie?
Yes.
Centaur?
Good to meet you earlier. And,
yes.
Appreciate you coming to be with us and sharing your experience. What is occurring now? I mean, Padilla, Woodward, you mentioned both those schools in my district, and they're getting accredited in some other manner, I would
Many of those are accredited by Cognia already, and some are by the Southern Association of Independent Schools. We have one school right now who's accredited with Cognia, and again, all of our schools are accredited, but the quality accreditation that we offer is what we're hoping for some of these smaller schools that are branching out. I'll share with you, in the last week, I've had two schools call me saying they're wanting to start a school. Of course, they can't become members because they're not accredited at this time, but we will work with them and help them do what they need to do to become a school, and then help them with that accreditation. But back to your question, some of our schools are pleased with the accreditation that they have already, especially if it's with Cognia or SAIS. I do have one school accredited with Cognia. I talked with her in the last month. It's time for them to renew that. Most of these are on 5-year cycles with a 2-year interim report. And I spoke with my connections at Cognia, and what she will do is go through our process for reaccreditation, and Cognia will automatically recognize it because we are a partner and recognize dual accreditation for them. Does that make that kind of clear?
But the schools that are in your association are, you say, already accredited by another of these entities?
Yes.
I see.
The member schools are. The affiliated schools are not.
Senator Burns.
Just a clarification question. Your schools may be members of more than one association, is that true?
Yes.
So they may be a SAIS school, or they could be a Georgia independent school, is that true?
Well, the Southern Association of Independent Schools is an association they belong to, right? Right.
Give me a little bit of background on Cognia and its work in other states.
Okay.
For example, Florida or neighboring communities as far as their accreditation.
Sure. Well, Cognia is an international accrediting agency. Years ago, we had the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. It became under the umbrella of Advanced Ed. Now it's all under the umbrella of Cognia. Their standards are very similar to ours. In fact, through our partnership, we submitted our entire manual for the accreditation process to them, and to be a partner had to be okayed. So our accreditation process is, I would say, a little more user-friendly because it is a state association. However, it coincides every one of our standards. And I do have the manuals here if anyone wanted to see them, all 54 pages. I'd be glad to share it. But every one of our standards is correlated to a Cognia standard, and it deals with leadership, generally leadership, resources in a school, and learning.
In a former life, I had the pleasure of being on the SACS Commission
There you
on
go.
Colleges Board, so I had the opportunity to perform the accreditation reviews for 13 southeastern states. So that Cognia is the next generation of SACS. Is that a fair statement? And again, just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, the reason we wish to include the Georgia Independent School Association in this definition is to make good students from your schools eligible for Hope scholarships and grants. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
As well as the best schools they can be.
And provide the students the opportunity to gain access to the best schools we have in our state and across our nation.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions? Senator Beach.
I, at this time, would move do pass HB 606 LC 490459.
Have a motion, 2 seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Always a pleasure, Mr. Chair.
I believe this concludes our business for the 2021 session in higher ed. We do have we had reserved a time at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, but it does not appear that we'll have any more business. So this should conclude our business for this legislative session. Thank you all so much for your participation. And we're out on time.